September 2025. I can see that we have present Councillors Buchanan, Dewar, Donnelly. I've got apologies from Councillor Fulton, but I can see that Councillor Toner is in attendance. Councillor Gowland is also present. Councillor Handybod, I'm not seeing you present. Also present today are Councillors Kerr, Lockhart and McDougall. Also in attendance today we have Councillor Convery and the Chief Executive. We have colleagues from our Audit Scotland, our external auditors, and a number of officers. And with that, I'll pass back to yourself, Chair.
Thanks very much. Okay, moving on to item 1, declaration of interest. Are there any declarations? Not seeing any. Thank you. So item 2, minutes of previous meetings. Okay, so minutes of previous meetings. So I'll propose to move these as a correct record. If I could have a seconder, please.
I'll second them, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Toner. Moving on to item 3A is our External Auditors Report 24-25, and I'd like to invite John Boyd of Audit Scotland, the Director, to speak to this report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. There's a number of papers that you have in front of you today from External Audit. I'll just touch briefly on each of the papers, covering agendas item 3, A, B and C, and then I'll go into a bit more detail just in terms of the annual report. Agenda item 3 covers our cover letter, essentially summarising the documents you have in front of you. They include our proposed independent auditor's opinion for inclusion within the annual accounts, a draft letter of representation. This is essentially representations that we ask from the Council on the date of signing the accounts, essentially taking events up to the date of signature, as in today's date. These are standard representations requested as part of all financial statements audit processes. You also have our proposed external audit report, which is presented to the committee in draft and will be finalised following signing of the accounts later today, subject to approval from the committee. The agenda item B is actually linked to our annual audit report. It's a report on the transformation of the Council and the transformation of Council services. This is a thematic report undertaken across all 32 local authorities that the Accounts Commission has requested all appointed auditors to undertake. The key findings and messages of that report are also included and summarised in our annual audit report, so I propose covering those as part of the presentation on the annual audit report. And finally, agenda item C, we have our proposed independent auditors reports for the trusts, which are completed as a separate audit process, and there were no significant matters arising during that audit. In terms of the annual audit report, I'll just draw committee's attention. The report itself starts on page 22 of the pack. The report, similar to previous years, is split into 2 key sections, covering my responsibilities as your auditor of the audit of the annual accounts, as well as the responsibilities under the Code of Audit Practice to report on wider scope audit aspects and conclusions on the arrangements to secure best value at the Council. In relation to the annual audit of the accounts, the key message to report to the committee is we intend to issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, both of South Lanarkshire Council and its group and Section 106 charities administered from the Council. Essentially, this is our conclusion that the annual accounts are free from material misstatement, essentially a clean bill of health. So the accounts that you have in front of you, based on the audit work performed, we're satisfied that they are free from material error. The annual management commentary and annual governance statement and remuneration report were all consistent with the financial statements, and prepared in accordance with applicable legislation and guidance. The annual accounts were of a good standard, and we've received good support and working papers throughout the audit process this year. This year, the annual accounts that you have in front of you include the adoption of IFRS 16, a revised standard on accounting for leases. This is the first year of adoption across the local government sector and had some significant impacts, predominantly on your balance sheet in terms of the recognition of leases and lease accounting. For context, across commercial sectors, the standard's been in place for a number of years, and the rest of the public sector adopted last year. This is the first year in which local authorities adopted. And we're pleased to report that the accounts that you have presented for approval today, we're satisfied that they've adopted IFRS 16 appropriately, essentially reflecting the requirements of the standards in the annual accounts. In relation to our wider scope audit work, this covers financial management, financial sustainability, vision, leadership and governance, and use of resources to improve outcomes, as well as our responsibilities for reporting of best value. We've highlighted that the Council continues to have strong financial management arrangements in place, as reflected with a continued performance in managing your resources within budget while maintaining the delivery of key services. We have highlighted the significant financial challenges in which the Council face, like other local authorities, strains on available funding resources, as well as pressures and rising pressures on demand and cost pressures through inflationary cost pressures, put significant strain on the Council's resources. And we've reflected on the financial plans and budget gaps identified by management that they have in place, but have confidence in management's ability to deliver those plans and address those budget gaps. In relation to best value, a key aspect, as I touched on, was focusing on the transformation work at the Council. And you'll see within paper B a detailed report on the transformation in place at the Council. A key aspect of our work is ensuring that your transformation plans are aligned to the overall strategic plans of the Council, including the Council plan, as well as underpinning financial and digital plans and strategies. We have highlighted areas of recommendation for the Council, and these are included within the appendix, including focusing on plans to address the financial pressures, as well as opportunities in relation to best value in establishing benefits realisation and ensuring they're appropriately monitored and tracked. Finally, I would just like to confirm our ongoing independence. As your appointed auditor, I'm required to remain independent of the Council, and myself and the team have retained that independence throughout the audit process. I'm joined today by my colleague Mark Ferris, who is the Senior Audit Manager, and Amanda Barclay, who is our Senior Auditor and leads on the audit at the Council. And we're happy to take any questions that the Council may have on the report or the audit itself. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr Boyd. Are there any questions arising from the report? Councillor Convery.
Chair, it's not a question, it's just a couple of comments, if you don't mind. First of all, I'd like to thank the Audit Commission for the report they've just gave us. It's no surprise to me, I've been in this council for 30 years, and every year our team in-house come back and give us an assurance that everything's good with our money. So I'd like to thank your team, and I'd like to thank the in-house team for the report. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Convery. I would echo that as well. Thank you very much. There's obviously huge amounts of work going into this. Is there any other questions? If not, I've got a couple of questions I'd like to put. They might not necessarily be to yourselves, they might be to other officers in the committee room. So the first one was regarding the timeliness of the reports that are required that were out with the Finance Department's control. It's noted, I think it's page 30, in recommendation 1, stating that staff should be reminded of the timetable. So it's really just a question, is this timetable tracked so that delays can be foreseen and acted upon before they become an issue? I don't know who would want to. Lorraine?
Morning members, thank you Chair for your question. Yes, we track the requirements from the different resources across the council, and as you said earlier, it is a large piece of work and it doesn't just involve the finance team, it does spread out across a number of departments. We track it as we go through. Sometimes we have difficulties in getting the information that's required. It's not because it's not necessarily there, it's sometimes because people are on annual leave and we've not been able to get it from them before they go. So I think the prompts from audit this year has meant that we'll take that a wee bit more seriously moving forward. You know, we rely on goodwill in terms of the other departments, but I think moving forward we will have a more detailed timeline, we'll have a more detailed allocation of tasks to individuals, and we'll make sure that their line managers know what's expected of them as we move forward, and hopefully we won't run into any of the difficulties that we've had this year. That said, we still met the timescales that we had to meet, and we still got the audit done in due consideration for coming to this meeting. So while we had a few wee hiccups, we got there in the end.
Thanks very much. There was another question I had as well in the wider scope audit. I think I've taken the wrong page number down though. It was regarding the key project documents for the Oracle Fusion project, which was, you know, a successful project. I note that the key project documents were not available, possibly due to the Council's retention policy. That appears to me to be quite an extraordinary omission, for not to have a kind of set of mandatory documents for such an important project, which has then maybe, you know, delayed the benefits realisation, which we might have another question about. So, given that it's a key project, is the policy for mandatory project documentation retention being reviewed? And I don't really know that who in this room, this is maybe more for, can you answer that please, Jackie? Thank you.
Just to get a little bit of context around that particular comment, the Fusion project is our rollout of our new system that deals with our financial management system, our HR, and other areas of our council business. It's not that we don't retain our mandatory documents on this particular occasion, because we have left behind an old system and have brought in a new system. There were just 1 or 2 items that were on the old system that we couldn't access. It's not that they're mandatory documents that we don't have. So I can give some comfort around that. It's not that we don't have a retention process. It was just one piece of information that the auditor asked for that was on the old system that we no longer had access to. But it didn't in any way impinge on us being able to deliver the system or its running, or our ability to generate the benefits that we are anticipating from the system.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Mary, did you have a question?
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I see that recommendation 3 also states that a post-implementation and benefits realisation review is recommended. Can this committee see that paper when this is undertaken?
Jackie.
Hi. Of course, you'd be welcome to see that. As you can see, we've committed to doing that once the system has embedded. That was always the intention of our period post-implementation, to take advantage of the support that we're getting from our partners and to make sure that we are realising the benefits that we had planned, but also any further developments that we can take on board to ensure that that system and that investment is paying dividends.
Thank you, Jackie. I've got one more. Okay. Recommendation 4 relating to the training and development of the members of this committee. Does the auditors have any analyses on the committee relating to this that we could refer to. And also I see this is a recommendation by SEPA or SEPA. And we should also know we did have an external review last year.
Is that maybe a question for the auditors about, you know, how that might how
fit
we
in.
might take that forward, and what kind
Yeah.
of, does that maybe be a separate meeting or something we could take forward with you? Mr. Boyd?
Yeah, so in terms of the member training, one aspect we've flagged is just about the self-assessment and effectiveness. So it's just good practice that you have that reflection. And in terms of the private session, yes, that's something we'll take forward to have a separate session just out with members. Just to refer back to the previous discussion about the system, I should have acknowledged my thanks to the finance team. It's a huge achievement. I know we've recommended areas of improvement for next year and actions, but implementing a new finance system and delivering your statutory audit in line with the end of September is a huge achievement, and actually is part of the audit process. In terms of the core finance, and a lot of our audit work now is data driven and really relies on the data from the system. We didn't have any challenges about reports and things, which is a testament to a good transition, if you like, to a new finance system in the year. So just to provide that thanks and reassurance, I suppose what we have recommended is areas of improvement going forward.
Thanks, Mr. Boyd. Yeah, no, I totally appreciate that. Obviously, where there's masses of good things to say, you have to home in on a few questions where you can probe a little bit. I think that's one of the purposes of this committee. So don't take it the wrong way. I know it's a huge achievement. Okay, thank you very much for that. So we'll move on to... Oh, sorry, need to agree the report, very importantly, sorry. So I'd like to ask the committee to agree the report, and I'll move that.
I'll second that, June.
Thank you very much. Nearly missed a really important thing there. Okay, moving on to item 3B. So this is a transformation piece, how councillors are redesigning and delivering more efficient services to achieve the planned outcomes, best value thematic work. Now, John, I know you I don't know if you want to come in again or if you feel that your first piece covered this.
Yeah, so there's an awful lot of overlap. The key messages are incorporated into our annual audit report. So I wouldn't really have anything significant to say. What we've tried to do in this report is reflect on some of the core transformation activity that's undertaken at the council, reflecting on the significant amount of work that's delivered across services at the council, but also then highlighting, and it's linked to that financial challenge, about the importance of the continued transformation to help deliver and realise benefits, both financial and non-financial benefits for the council to address the challenges it faces.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I think the approach being taken is a good one. My only question around this one was the actions and recommendations in this report. Will they be tracked and reported back on at this committee? Is that Jackie?
Yeah, we have a process for all of the actions that come out of all of our audits, the external audits and our internal audits, and they're tracked by Yvonne's team to make sure that we're responding to them on time and properly. What we have is, as John mentioned, within our overarching audit report, we have the details of this year's actions, but also updates on previous year's actions as well. So that will be covered in the future report from the external auditor.
Okay, that's what I expected. Thank you very much. Any other questions on the Transformation 3B paper? No questions? Okay, I'll move the report for approval, please.
I'll have pleasure in seconding.
Thanks very much. And we're just whizzing through this. Obviously, it's massive amounts of work we've gone into these. So, item 3C, this is our external auditor's report 24-25 for the South Lanarkshire Council Charitable Trusts. And I'll invite Mark Ferris, our Senior Audit Manager, to speak to this, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As John already covered this as part of his introduction. So before you have the South Lanarkshire Council Charitable Trust annual accounts, the audit covers our annual audit report and our covering letters. Page 110 summarises the key messages, outlines our annual audit opinions and states that the annual accounts were free from material misstatement. In summary, again, this means that's a clean bill of health. As detailed on page 116, we're required to report to you under ISO 260 if there are any significant findings coming out of the audit. I can confirm that we have nothing to report on this. And page 117 outlines the results and the conclusions of our work on the risk that we reported within our annual audit report, annual audit plan. And again, we have no significant issues to report from this work, but more than happy to take any questions on the report.
Thanks, Mr Ferris. Do you have any questions on the Charitable Trust accounts report? I'm not seeing any questions. So in that case, I'll move the report for committee.
And I'll second, Chair.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Chair. So now that we've had the reports from John and Mark from the Audit Scotland perspective, the purpose of this report is to advise members of the requirement to approve the annual accounts for signature for both the Council and the related charitable trusts. So in terms of the background then, in section 3.1 we just note the Scotland Regulations 2014 require that members of the committee are required to meet to consider approval of the audited accounts for signature. The members are also required to have regard to any report made or advice provided on the annual accounts by the external auditor, and that's the reports that you've heard from Audit Scotland this morning. In terms of the audited accounts then for South Lanarkshire Council, in section 4 we're noting there members have already been supplied with a copy of the audited accounts prior to signature, and we're looking for members to approve that these can be signed following this morning's meeting. As detailed by John, and at the time of writing this report, we had discussed and agreed a clean audit certificate for the accounts, and we are noting in section 4.4 we have an agreed action plan which officers of the Council will implement during 25-26, and those are some of the actions we've discussed this morning as well. Section 5 picks up on the charitable trust, so again the requirement is there for this committee to approve the charitable trusts for signature. And again, you've had a copy of them emailed to you over the past week. Again, we're noting then the clean audit certificate for the trusts. So if I can refer committee back to the recommendations in section 2 and ask that it be noted that the South Lanarkshire Council accounts and the charitable accounts have received a clean audit certificate, that the audited South Lanarkshire Council accounts and the charitable trust accounts be approved for signature, that it be noted that external auditor's report will be referred to South Lanarkshire Council for information, and that the audited accounts for the last financial year will be available on the Council's website following signature today. Thank you.
Thanks, Lorraine. Congratulations again on the clean audit certificate, and thanks for all the work that's been done on that by the auditors and yourselves. So I'd like to move the report that the accounts are ready for signature and approval. Thank you.
I've got pleasure in seconding. Thank you, Lorraine.
Okay, where our Chief Executive and Deputy Council Leader can leave now, if you wish. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, our internal audit activity report. And I'll ask Yvonne Douglas, our Audit and Compliance Manager, to speak to us, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, you'll probably note that this is a slightly different format to the activity reports that you're used to receiving, and this is us moving into this new period of the global internal audit standards that we were required to comply with from the 1st of April. So the format of this report will continue to evolve as we go through this year. I'm happy to take feedback from members at any point in terms of the content around the way that we're complying with the standards, or and even in the detail around how I report in terms of progress or audit findings. So despite it's a new format, the main purposes of the report remain the same. So this is me coming to give you an update on progress with the audit plan. I'm reporting on my team's performance in the period. I'm reporting findings from audit assignments, and I'm also required in the new standards to set out any other relevant matters to you at this point in time. So I'll just take you through briefly each of the sections, kind of pulling out the kind of main points. Section 3 starts in the report giving you a summary of progress with our delivery of the agreed audit plan. 74% of assignments are in progress, 14% at a final report stage. That is comparable to previous years. However, we would like to make some inroads in terms of our performance, in terms of delivering final reports at an earlier stage in the year. And that's what the table at 3.1 is doing. It's setting out some targets for me in terms of how I progress the plan to draft report stage for the meetings that fall for the duration of 25-26. Section 3 also includes a high-level summary of performance. The committee will be familiar with performance indicators. It used to be a single page with maybe 5 or 6 different indicators. We now have expanded that significantly, and those are set out in Appendix 1. There's some colour coding there in terms of whether we think we're on target or not. So hopefully fairly self-explanatory. Red, I'm flagging to you as saying there's an issue around being able to deliver this by the end of the financial year. Amber, I anticipate we can deliver, but there's some slippage. And green, I'm saying that we're on target. You'll note that there are a few amber statuses in the appendix, and what we've done at the table at 3.6 is set out what we think the corrective action that we need to take to bring these back in line and to be able to deliver these by the end of the year. I don't think there's significant slippage there, and I think all of the corrective actions should be sufficient to allow me to meet each of the performance indicators that we've set out in Appendix 1. Section 4 of the report then takes you through the output from audit assignments that's been completed in the period 1st June to 31st August. And a summary of those assignments are set out at 4.2. For the first time, what I'm trying to do is set out there the scope of the assignment, so it's to give you an understanding of what the audit covered. And then Appendix 2, I'm providing a summary of what the audit findings were, which again is something that would have been in the previous activity report. But there's a wee bit more information there in the first instance around what the scope of the assignments were. Where there's been an action plan, I've highlighted that in Appendix 2, so you can see the pieces of work that have delivered a series of actions that need to then be implemented by council services. One of the assignments that we completed in the period related to a new act that requires large organisations to have robust anti-fraud arrangements. And for the first time, it sets out a new offence that it calls failure to prevent fraud. Now, if this is proven in court, it can lead to unlimited fines. So that has prompted a review on our part in terms of our existing anti-fraud arrangements, and that's set out in Appendix 3. Helpfully, the Home Office have come up with some guidance in terms of how you review your anti-fraud arrangements, and they take you through 6 different areas. And what we've done is we've used those 6 headings, we've noted our current practice, and we've then listed a series of suggested additional actions. As a team, we're now progressing each of those actions with an intention to complete them by the end of 25-26. And I'll capture updates to the committee in future fraud reports around the action plan, so you can see that that is being progressed. There's one other assignment in relation to Accounts Commission consultation. I've also attached our response at Appendix 4. I don't think there's anything significant in there, but it's just sharing that for the committee's information. In terms of the audit plan, it continues to remain relevant and mapped to the Council's top risks. However, there's one assignment that I'm asking the committee today that I am allowed to defer into 26-27. The reason being that we really need access to Social Work Resources' new IT system, which is currently in progress of being implemented and isn't at a far enough stage for us to do some audit testing. So I'm asking the committee's approval today to defer that assignment and replace it with a different Social Work Resources assignment looking at direct payments, which is related to self-directed support but a very specific area. Moving on then, the report takes you through audit actions. It's noting that 36 separate audit actions fell during the period and 88% are being advised as implemented in time. Of the remaining 12%, this is just a timing issue and that the actions haven't been delivered by their due date, but there's anticipation that they will be delivered in full. Again, that's something that we will do separate follow-up work, and the committee can expect to see further reports on that. The final section of the report takes you through the new internal audit standards. Just a reminder in terms of the committee's responsibility and also the progress with an internal audit in terms of applying those standards. There was two main areas where we'd identified we needed to do some work. One was in relation to performance indicators, which we've addressed by the activity report that you have today in that expanded set of performance indicators in the appendix. And the second is to develop a full internal audit strategy. The intention is to bring that to the committee in December, which would mean that we'd have that in place ahead of bringing an audit plan to you in the following year for 26-27. Those are the two main areas where we felt we had some work to do, but I'll give the committee a full update in December in terms of our position in terms of compliance with the new standards. That's the kind of main points within this report, so if I can just take you to the recommendations which are set out at 2.1. And they just follow the same structure as the report. So firstly, I'm asking that you note our progress in delivering the internal audit plan for 25-26. You note the performance in the period to 31st of August is set out in Appendix 1. That the proposed amendment to the audit plan that I've just talked you through very briefly there is approved. That the audit output from the assignments that we've completed in the period, which we set out in Appendices 2 and 3, are noted. And lastly, that you note our responses to the Accounts Commission consultation, which is set out in Appendix 4. And happy to take any questions, Chair, that MD may have on this report, or any feedback on the format or the content, either now or at a later date. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Yvonne. Again, another comprehensive piece of work. Thank you. Any questions from the committee in the room or online? No? Okay, we did have a question about the self-directed support, but you've already explained the reason for that. So you've headed that one off at the pass. I had another question. I think this is more maybe just my reading of how the table is set out, and it might just be me not understanding it. So it's Appendix 1, page 131. And again, I can't refer to a number because there's no number on the list. So it's the plan completed to draft report stage by 30th of April. So the target is 100% and the actual is 14%. So is that the target, obviously, at the 30th of April? And currently we're at 14% towards that?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So we just, we do a calculation in terms of the number of assignments, and then we work out how many are at final report stage. The kind of thinking behind that is when I come with an annual report, I need to have final reports that sit behind that have been agreed with council services that allows me then to report audit findings and then any actions that have come from that. So that's why that statistic's really important, having approved a plan. That's you getting a statistic that tells you that I'm working my way through that plan and I'm completing it. And that's the one that I highlighted at the very start around the table, saying I've got a plan in terms of how the 14% goes to 100%, and it's set out in the table. I think that's just on the first page, on page 125, for the remaining 3 meetings ahead of getting the 25-26 annual report. That's my anticipated delivery pattern in terms of bringing final reports to you.
Interim milestones for
yeah,
that.
so that gives you something to track our progress with. So when I come to the next committee, I'm expecting the 14% to have changed to 29%. So that gives the committee something to track our overall delivery to, and helps them scrutinise our performance, yes, which is a really important aspect of the new standards that's asking committees to look at both performance as well as output.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Yvonne. I had one more thing, which was more of an observation. Once I had kind of fully read all the reports, I mentioned at the pre-meeting regarding the fraud case in Aberdeen, serious fraud case in Aberdeen, and I note in the report that there has been some additional controls introduced, although the actual controls we had were deemed to be pretty robust. As I say, it's more of an observation that lessons do get learned and shared between councils. Okay, any other questions Nothing? Okay, in that case, I'll ask the committee to approve the report. I'll move that.
Thank you. I'll second, Chair.
Okay, so this is where we, I think, want to bring forward item 11 to let Ian go to another important meeting. So I'll ask Ian to speak on the annual update of the use of surveillance powers, the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act 2000. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you. Morning. So, the purpose of the report to provide committee with an updated version of the Council's Regulation of Investigatory Powers Scotland Act 2000 policy, known as RIPSA, provide an overview and update on the use of directed surveillance powers by the Council. Use of surveillance can provide the Council with a valuable resource for the protection of the public and maintenance of law and order. Where surveillance is covert, must be authorised in accordance with the regulations to ensure it's lawful. By way of explanation, CCTV isn't subject generally to this because it is overt. RIPSA, as set out there in 3.3, that's a relevant legal framework. We have to comply with RIPSA, adhere to the regulated authorisation procedures, and this our use of that and our compliance is overseen by the Investigatory Powers Commissioner's Office, provide that independent oversight, and they do carry out inspections on the Council and other public authorities on a regular basis. I've set out there in section 4 a bit of a brief overview of RIPSA. Briefly, directed surveillance can only be conducted to achieve one or more permitted RIPSA purposes, so preventing or detecting crime or prevention of disorder, interests of public safety, or protecting public health. There's a well set out authorisation process by certain named authorising officers within the Council. Authorisations need to be in writing. And will only be authorised where the officer is satisfied that it's necessary and proportionate. And then there's other requirements in connection with time periods, review renewals and cancellation. It is important that elected members receive regular updates on the Council's use of its surveillance powers, given that they are potentially intrusive. And IPCO recommends its public reporting. So the committee is aware in the last 5 years, so from 2021, the Council has made no use of RIPSA for either covert direct surveillance or covert human intelligence sources. And going forward in line with best practice and the expectations of IPCO, we would bring an annual report to the committee on the use of RIPSA, even if there has been none. We've reviewed the RIPSA policy, made some minor updates, really reflecting changes in structure, aligning the two protocols, and they're included in Appendix 1. Given the minor changes, I was content that these were made under delegated authority. So then taking back to the recommendation, asking committee to approve, noting the contents of the report, noting the updates to the Council's RIPSA policy, and noting that the Council's use of surveillance powers under RIPSA would be reported annually to the committee going forward. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Ian. Does anyone have any questions on that item? Wasn't even aware that the Council had these powers, so that was news to me. So, very informative, thank you. If there's no questions, I will move that report. Thank you, Ian, and let you
I'm happy to second,
go to
Chair.
your other meeting. Thanks very much. Okay, back to item 6, of course. Yeah. Okay, so we revert back to the standard agenda. So we're back at financial resilience and sustainability. And again, I will ask Lorraine O'Hagan, Head of Finance and Strategy, to speak to that, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this item then looks at, excuse me, it gives a position statement on the Council's financial outlook. It looks at our financial resilience and sustainability, and it looks at how we can respond to the risks posed by the financial challenges ahead. So in terms of Section 3, we give some background to the report, and we refer back to the June report to Executive Committee, which noted that we would provide an annual update on the Council's financial sustainability, and we think the Risk and Audit Scrutiny Forum is the appropriate place for that. This report does that and hopefully demonstrates that the Council understands its financial outlook and provides information on the Council's financial resilience and sustainability moving forward. So Section 4 of your report this morning details the financial position over the next 2 years. And in section 4 specifically, we noted that we had originally had a budget gap of 24 million, which we had taken to Executive Committee back in June, and which took account of a number of assumptions, including estimated grant levels and cost increases. We also note in section 4.2 that that budget gap could increase to 42 million as a result of the pay award. So what this demonstrates is that we are doing horizon scanning and that we do understand our medium-term financial outlook. Section 4.3 of the paper highlights the programme of transformational reviews and provides details of the savings achieved to date through those reviews. Section 4.4 goes on to note that the reviews continue to progress and they demonstrate that we do have a structured approach to identifying savings moving forward. These are key to managing the budget gap, albeit we do appreciate they will not likely cover its full extent. Section 4.6 of the report goes on to note council tax as being another lever available to members to allow us to manage the budget gap. And section 4.7 notes our relatively low level of council tax from a national perspective. Section 4.8 goes on to highlight that we could develop a strategy to bring our council tax in line with other councils. And again, that demonstrates that we have a structured approach that we look to present to members for their consideration moving forward. Given the pressures we face financially, section 4.9 notes that we need to demonstrate good financial management and how we will manage in these challenging times. And that's what we go on to cover in section 5, which picks up on financial resilience. So financial resilience then is a crucial part of financial management and is particularly important in following years of inflationary cost increases that we've had to bear. So this is about more than looking at the level of usable reserves that we have, noting that we do acknowledge that councils need to be more comprehensive in their assessment of financial resilience. This paper demonstrates the financial resilience of the council by picking up on some key aspects of financial strength and by highlighting some areas that we will continue to monitor as we move forward so that we're able to anticipate and respond to changes in the financial environment, whether that's internally or externally. In order to do that, we need to know what resources we have available at that time in terms of any crisis that may arise, and that's not just about looking at reserves. It's also about understanding exposure to the movement in a number of various lines, whether it be income or expenditure lines, and we need to know what flexibility we have in terms of accessing funds if we require them. Appendix 1 to your report this morning provides a framework which looks at the balance sheet, and it also looks at the exposure to risk in terms of council performance and financial stability. We've also included the local government benchmarking information for your information, but I would point out that for any set of indicators, it may be that rather than comparing us to other councils, it may be better to look at a trend in our own data as we move across years, which might give you a better indication of how we are faring. Section 5.6 of the report then provides a summary of the financial resilience framework, and it's really about demonstrating the level of financial resilience in a number of different ways. So firstly then, we hold an uncommitted general reserve to protect against unforeseen events, and that sits alongside a level of earmarked reserves that have been approved by members, and in some of the instances we can use these to manage or smooth the impact of pressures over a number of years. Excuse me. So, for example, areas that you'll be aware of, in recent years we've had the Loans Fund Review, we've had service concessions, and more recently pension fund contributions which were lower than had been budgeted for. And those have allowed us to put lump sums of money into our reserves and then allowed us to use them on a planned basis agreed by members over a number of years. And that's to allow us to bed in some longer term permanent budget solutions into our budget strategy planning. As well as that, we also acknowledge the level of debt costs that we have compared to our net income, and that has gone up over the last couple of years. However, that is the result of planned and approved borrowing, again approved by elected members. And we're also very clear and considered in our approach to borrowing, and we advise members of the issue of affordability in terms of our budget planning, and any borrowing that we do undertake is part of our planned budget strategy, and importantly it's about being affordable. We're also acknowledging that we need to be aware of both external and internal pressures, and to do that we need to keep an eye on some key income and expenditure lines, as I mentioned previously, and these are detailed in the framework for your information. Section 5.9 notes again that we continue to participate in the local government benchmarking framework, and again just noting there that a direct comparison isn't always the right thing to do, but it does give us a bit of a trend and a feel for where we are if we look at our own contextual position. From the Council's own perspective, our earmarked reserve sits at £13 million, and that is lower than the Scottish average, But we feel that's appropriate, but we will continue to monitor that. And section 5.9 finally notes that we had a break-even position for the last financial year, which again is a positive position. Section 5.10 goes on to just provide you a summary there in terms of noting that we're demonstrating our financial resilience by explaining our detailed financial planning. We're aware of the key financial risks that are out there, and we also highlight our strong balance sheet position. And the final point there is any risk that we do identify is mitigated by planning for them through our financial strategy. So if I can take you back to the recommendations in section 2 and ask the committee approve the following: that the financial position and plan for 26-27 and 27-28 noted in section 4 is noted, and also that the financial resilience framework that we've highlighted in section 5 and appendix 1 is also noted. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, so any questions on the financial resilience and sustainability paper? No questions? Okay, I don't have any questions on that. Thought it was good paper. So I will, it is an item for noting, so I'll move that for approval for noting.
I'll second that, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So moving on to item 7, Audit Scotland Local Government Budgets 2025-26. Invite Lorraine back again, Head of Finance, to speak.
Thanks again. So this report is really a summary report on the Audit Scotland paper on local government budgets 25-26. So I'm just noting in section 3 there's a link there to the paper for your information. In terms of section 4, we're looking at the key messages from the report and provide a little bit of an introduction there. So the data is collated from all 32 councils, and it looks to provide an indicative national picture of budgets for 25-26. It also considers how these budget challenges are being addressed in terms of setting a balanced budget and looking at long-term financial stability. It also looks at how councils consult with communities. So the key messages then are noted in section 4.5 and picked up in a bit more detail through section 5 itself. So in terms of section 5 then, it covers the Scottish Government funding to councils and provides details of the movement in grant across years for context, noting both the revenue and the capital position. Section 5.2 goes on to note that councils continue to identify savings and review how they deliver services. And that will feel familiar to you with regard to our own council, because that's the kind of things we're doing as part of the transformation review, is just challenging how we deliver things and what we deliver. This section of the report also highlights such areas of impact on the budget, for example, national insurance increases, but also, as I mentioned in the last report, reduction in pensions costs, which we've been able to use to assist us in managing the budget strategy over the coming years. That section also notes the council tax position across Scotland, and again we're noted in that section as having the lowest increase in Scotland for 25-26 and indeed the lowest level of council tax. Section 5.3 goes on to look at consulting with communities, and the commentary notes that it's more important than ever that we involve communities in the decisions that we make as a council that impact on their local services. Section 6 notes that the Audit Scotland report mentions their own council in some of the tables of data that covers all 32 councils. So the budget gaps across councils are noted, but there are differences in the ways that some councils present their data. So again, sometimes it's not appropriate to make a direct comparison, or at least if you do it, maybe do it with a little bit of caution. So it's noted there that we had a budget gap of 5 million or so, and I would just make the point that that's quite late on in the process as we're moving towards balancing our budget. We did set a balanced budget back in February, and we managed the budget gap. A clear comparator in terms of the level of council tax is noted in 6.5 of your report, again just picking up on the figures there for ourselves and others. In terms of consulting with the community, which is picked up in section 6.7, we do this through the budget consultation exercise every year. You'll be aware of that as elected members, and we do provide feedback to yourselves to allow you to make informed decisions. One of the things that came out of the report this morning that John and Mark were talking about earlier is in terms of the consultation and I suppose squaring the circle, so doing the full 360, so get the information from local communities in terms of what their views are, provide that to elected members, but the bit that we haven't necessarily provided back to the local community is the impact of their views and their reviews going back to elected members. So that's something we're going to pick up with Tom Little's team when we do the budget consultation this year, and just make sure that we're doing all of that activity and feeding back to the communities on the decision-making process. So if I can refer members back then to the recommendations in section 2 of the report, and just note the key messages and the data from Audit Scotland Local Government Budgets 25-26, detailed in sections 4.5 that's noted, and also the commentary in the Council's position in section 6 also be noted. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any questions in the room or online? No? I just wanted to make a sort of observation. I think it's a really good paper, thank you. Just in terms of 6.7, in terms of consulting with communities regarding the budget, I just wanted to pull out one item which was regarding the Local Action Fund. And obviously that doesn't involve consulting, and it's probably small beer in the scheme of things in terms of the delivery of services. But for the Local Action Fund, it was deemed that there would be £50,000 per ward, and it would be decided by the ward members what that should be spent on. And obviously that has no part in consultation with the community. So that is, I think, a gap in that consultation piece. Obviously it was signed off at budget time, but I just wanted to highlight that as a potential gap in terms of consultation as a policy. Thank you. Mary?
Yeah, the feedback from the communities was that was quite a big pressure on councillors in their wards where they were dividing that money up. So I think a strategy going forward to change that, if we are doing that ever again, would be helpful because that's not seriously consulting communities. So it's been economical with the truth.
Councillor Kerr, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just want to disagree with what's just been said there. I absolutely consulted with the community, lots of people in the community, and I've got to say everyone in the community that the money is going towards is absolutely delighted by it. And yes, I took lots of time speaking to lots of people in my ward. I didn't take it as literally as you've obviously taken it, that it's just to be decided by you. Not at all. I spoke to lots of people, as I'm sure lots of my colleagues did too.
Yes, we also spoke to people as well, but it was actually, in the end, it was a decision for councillors and for the executive where it was signed off. That's the facts of the matter.
Yeah.
There was no requirement whatsoever to consult with communities. Obviously people do, but if they want to. And I don't really want to get any debate about it, but facts. Okay. Just want to note the report and move it for approval.
I'll second the report.
Thanks, Mary. Okay. Item 8, Fraud Statistics Annual Report 24-25. And that would be Yvonne Douglas again from Audit and Compliance to speak to that, please.
Thank you, Chair. So again, a kind of familiar report to the committee, coming to you with fraud statistics this time for 24-25. Again, we're trying to develop the format of this report. There's a wee bit more in the report for the first time, and that's to try and capture all of the anti-fraud work that happens over the course of the year. Again, happy to take feedback in terms of the content of the report or format for going forward to help develop it into something that's really useful for members. Having said all that, the main purpose of the report remains the same. So it is to set out fraud statistics to you. And as I said, it's for 24-25 and then to give you the comparison to 23-24. Because it is a series of statistics, it sits within tables on pages 162 and 163 at 4.3, 4.5 and 4.6. And I'll just kind of quickly take you through each of the tables. So the first one is the caseload that tracks the progress over the course of the year. Just a few things to highlight there for you. You'll note that there's fewer cases being reported, and that's reflecting the fact that people are transitioning to universal credit, which is administered by the Department of Work and Pensions. So that will be reflected in the statistics that are being reported because that sits out with the scope of South Lanarkshire Council. The number of cases closed is significantly up. Again, that's us closing down anything that doesn't have a housing benefit element, so that we reflect only those cases that are within the scope of the council, and we'll continue to reflect that in the statistics going forward. Table 2 then looks at all of the cases that have been closed, and it tells you what the outcome of those cases are. So you'll see the majority sits under housing benefit, and out with that, only 8% of the cases that were closed were deemed to be fraudulent. And the final table takes you through the founded cases and tells you the source of each of those. And you'll note that none of them were internal, and by internal we mean that it relates to a South Lanarkshire Council employee. Out with this, the report has a few other kind of pieces of information. As I mentioned, we set out our other fraud work that's been undertaken in the year, Appendix 1. Just a very high-level summary to give you a flavour of the kind of types of things that come through but don't reflect in the statistics that we would traditionally report to the committee. We touch on the learning points from the council tax fraud in Aberdeen City Council, which is the one that we referred to previously. It was really helpful to share the details of that. It allowed us to undertake a review of our arrangements. We haven't fundamentally changed the process, but what we have done, the report notes that what we now do is data matching of refunds ahead of those being processed. So just an additional check to allow us to review the bank accounts that are receiving refunds. So it was really helpful to get the details to allow us to undertake that specific review. There's an update in the National Fraud Initiative exercise. You'll remember that's where we extract a series of data sets. We supply them to the Cabinet Office and they match them across all public sector bodies. 25-26 is our investigation year, so when the matches are returned to us, we undertake a series of investigations. Council services are working well through all of those, and I'll report back in terms of outcomes which don't look at this point in time to be significantly different from any of the other exercises. Other areas that are covered by the report, work that we've undertaken to analyse our fraud controls using the 3 lines model. We've done a comparison of our current fraud practice to best practice, and that aligns to the previous piece of work that I referred to, the new legislation and failure to prevent fraud. So that was one aspect of it, was to compare your existing fraud practices to best practice. We've put the full analysis at Appendix 2. I've highlighted if there's a shaded area, that means it's an area where I think we need to take some action. And again, that's a point that I'll pick up when I'm reporting back to future meetings of the Audit Committee. And lastly, we just touch on the serious and organised crime, the delivery plan launch at the beginning of May. And note that that will now be progressed by various partners, and I'll continue to provide a high-level update within the fraud report for committee members noting. So in terms of the action and the recommendations within this report, it's simply that you note the contents. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Evelyn. Another comprehensive report. Do we have any questions in the room or online? No questions. I don't have any questions either. Thank you very much. I'll move that for noting.
I'll second that.
Thanks very much. Okay, so moving on to item 9, our year-end insured claims report for 2024-25, and I'll ask Scott Dunsmore, Insurance and Risk Management Advisor, to speak to this report, please. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. This report looks at the trends in the number and cost of insurance claims, and the main classes of claim covered by the report are liability, motor and property. The 5-year overview is provided at section 4 to the report, so you'll see there that we've had 846 claims intimated across all classes of insurance for 24-25. That is in line with the average for the last 5 years. Claims costs are estimated at £4.1 million for 24-25. That's notably above average, with average coming in at £2.9 million. Last year's claims figures include a significant storm claim, Storm Iwan, which hit at the start of the year. In terms of other trends, just to highlight to the committee, you'll see at section 7 of the report, our motor claims numbers have reduced by 6%. The number of at-fault accidents per vehicle are also down. That's covered in table 1 in the report. Our motor claims costs, however, have increased by £183,000, so that's up by 26%. And the main reason for that is that we've had a small number of more serious accidents last year. Property insurance claims, again, claims numbers are positive. We've seen a 21% reduction, but our costs have gone up by 31%. The reason for that is twofold. Firstly, I mentioned Storm Iwan, that's the number one and probably biggest reason. Secondly, we've had some more significant house fires during 24-25. Severe weather events are also, we're also seeing higher costs of claims coming through, with significant claims for weather events, for burst pipes and storms over the last 3 years, and we do expect that trend to continue. That covers the main claims highlights. There is a fair bit of work ongoing to mitigate against claims. Again, going back to the motor side of things, we do provide motor accident reports to our resources to highlight the claims that are coming through for each resource. And we do encourage resources to undertake challenging driver behaviour learn online training, assessments and target support through our driver instructors, and also to undertake fact-finding investigations where appropriate. In terms of liability claims, a health and safety training review was undertaken last year, and an action plan has been prepared to help mitigate against work-related accidents and claims. So good progress has been made there. 81% of actions due by the end of last year have been completed, and that action plan is ongoing. Finally, an analysis of all our claims has been completed by the risk management team. So that is really just to highlight areas of concern within each resource. That analysis has been provided to each resource, and feedback sought on measures in place and planned further actions, again, to mitigate against these claims. So we'll keep the committee informed of progress on the mitigation work. We're really just looking for the committee to note the content of this report, and again, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much. Do we have any questions for Scott regarding this? No questions? Okay, well, I'll just thank you for the report. Obviously, the climate change is going to continue to have impacts on our insured risks. And I think any actions are being taken that can be taken, so thank you very much. So I'll ask the committee to approve the report, please.
I'll second that report. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so on to item 10, and Scott again on the end of year risk management report and review of the council's top risks for 24-25, please.
Thanks, Chair. So this report provides an update on progress with risk management activity that was undertaken during 24-25, and also provides an update on the council's top risk register following review. You'll see it's section 4 of the report that covers resource compliance with the risk management strategy. So that's supported by Appendix 1. Resources continue to demonstrate full compliance with the strategy. Section 5 covers progress in delivering actions to mitigate against top risks. So again, you'll see there are 73% of actions have been completed. 4 actions have been carried forward to the new work plan, and they'll be on they're scheduled to be completed by the end of the current financial year. The results of the review are covered at section 6 of the report. And just again to bring out a couple of key points on that, the National Care Service bill risk has been removed from the top risk register, with the government moving away from the idea of a National Care Service. Previously, we had 2 separate risks for emergency planning and pandemic risks. So these have been merged into a wider resilience risk that covers any type of civil emergency. Table 3 to the report provides a summary of changes to our risk scores and the reason for those changes. And the updated risk register is attached at Appendix 2 to the report. Table 5 in the report covers the council's risk profile. So you'll see there that the majority of risks sit in the high and medium bracket. 20% of the risks are ranked very high. That is an improvement on last year, with fewer high and very high risks. So we're now closer to the ideal risk exposure as defined by our risk management strategy. That concludes that report, and again, I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Scott. Do we have any questions for Scott in the room? or online? You got a question, Mary?
Thank you, Scott, for that report. I note the top risk in page 188 would again be helpful to have them numbered. It states that this indicator has increased in part due to the increase in employer national insurance contributions introduced by the Westminster Government, having an adverse effect on the third and private sectors, with knock-on effects for council services and residents. And with the UK Government ending overseas recruitment of care workers, I know we're struggling in social work and the care field, this is having a major effect on our vulnerable service users.
You want to comment on that? I don't know if there was a question there. Did you want to comment on that at all, Scott?
Yeah, just to echo what the councillor says, some of these things are kind of out with our control, and you're absolutely right, it is impacting upon the service, so that kind of reflects the increase in the risk score there.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Happy with that? Okay, so in that case, I'd like to, if there's no other questions, which doesn't seem to be, I'd like to ask the committee to note that report, please.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, so we already covered item 11, so that one's done. So really, we're whizzing through this. So I think the final item is item 12, the forward programme for future meetings. And I'll ask Elizabeth Ann, Administration Advisor, to speak to that, please.
Thanks, Chair. Committee will be aware this is a standard item that comes to each meeting of the committee, and the background is set out at paragraph 3.1 of your report on page 231 of the pack. The purpose of the report is to advise members of the forward programme for this committee, and in the case of this report, meetings are detailed up to the 29th of September 2026, as detailed in your appendix. Members are also invited to suggest topics for inclusion in the committee's forward programme. The recommendation is set out at paragraph 2.1, where the committee is asked to note the forward programme up to the 29th of September 2026. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Elizabeth Ann. And I'd be quite keen to take forward with the committee the suggestion from the Audit Scotland report regarding how we become more effective as a committee, and I'd quite like to kind of have a separate review of that. I know we've spoken before about training items, and I think there has been some training, but we maybe want to include revised training, refresher training, and I know some people, you know, there's changes of personnel within the committee as well as other things that we might want to look at. So I'd be really keen to do that for everyone that's on the committee. Okay, any other comments or questions? And there's no urgent business, so thank you everyone for attending this meeting, and thanks for our auditors and our finance and audit and risk colleagues. Thank you very much.
You know, for hard work.